you. Thanks, Maurice. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to tell you a little bit about behavioral economics and what it tells us about people's behavior. I'm Tanjim Hossain from University of Toronto. As you probably know, I'm affiliated with our newly created Institute for Management and Innovation and also the Rotman School of Management. So today, I'm going to talk to you about behavioral economics and what we have learned from recent research in behavioral economics that can be used for consumers. So behavioral economics tells us, I'll be telling you about what it tells us about workplace or how we behave as managers and workers. And also I'll tell you about what it tells us about how we behave as consumers. And hopefully by the end of the talk, all will make sense and will be useful. So what is behavioral economics? Maurice talked about it a little bit. So in standard economics, standard rational economics, thank you, Maurice, we assume that people are perfectly rational. What does that mean? That means that everybody, people and firm, maximizes some kind of profit or monetary value. More importantly, they know they don't make a mistake. So they maximize perhaps some kind of monetary value over long horizon, or at least some optimization problem based on self-interest. They don't care about others. They don't make any mistake. They take every possibilities into consideration. They make all the complicated calculations and so on. In reality, that's probably slightly different. People probably do not take everything into consideration. People care about altruistic behavior. More importantly, we make mistakes. We do not take all the probabilities into consideration. We don't calculate as much as we should. We don't think about 10,000 different future contingencies and so on. However, behavioral economics looks at, there is a pattern to the mistakes people make. And the goal for behavioral economics is to figure out such patterns and to figure out how we can design policies so that people and firms can make better choices. So policies from the government's perspective or the business perspective. So behavioral economics started, in some sense, was started by psychologists. Early evidences come from psychology experiments, and psychology experiments mostly are done in labs, and people are asked a hypothetical question. If in this situation, what would you buy? How would you feel? And people report how they would feel. Economists don't always believe in what people say. We are more cynical. We care about what people do. So economic experiments, which started much later than psychology experiments in the 60s, so what we do there is, again, starting in the lab, create an economic situation, a simulation, a market situation, and ask people to participate as a participant in a say made-up role, but their payoffs, the amount of money they get at the end of the experiment, depends on the decisions they make and other people make. Because in economy, ultimately, the money I make depends not only on my decisions, but decisions of everybody else in the market. So that is, in some sense, an improvement, and both psychology experiments and economic experiments have given us tremendous insights about people's behavior. In fact, economic experiments, at least in the 60s, people started more from the standard complete rationality framework, but that has also given us many wonderful or useful insights on people's behavior. Now, what I do, and it's a field that started in more like mid-90s, maybe there was some work earlier, but mainly mid-90s, is that the issue some people had with psychology and economic experiments in the lab is that how externally valid is that? Because even in an economic situation where we are paying people, many of them are just students, it's not a real-world situation. So how we behave in the lab may not be as indicative of how we behave in the real world. So the idea of field experiment is that we as economists or researchers, and could be academic researchers, but these days many businesses do that, especially online businesses. We go to the field. It can be a marketplace and act as a regular participant, as buyer or seller, or we go to the field in a business, in a farm or a firm, and make changes in incentive contracts of workers. So, and see what they actually do in a real life situations. And in laboratory experiments, when people participate, they know they're part of an experiment. In field experiments, usually one important thing is that people don't know they're part of an experiment. So we have done experiments where we participated in online auctions as sellers, and we sold the real product and making changes in the structure of the selling process and observing how people's behavior changed. But we actually sold the product. The buyers, we were just another store on eBay or Yahoo or so on, and buyers bought the product. So the insight from such work is, in some sense, a bit more externally valid. So I'll be talking about field experiments a lot, but I'll also draw some of the results from lab experiments or even observational data. And it's quite appropriate that I talk quite a bit about field experiments here, because many of the early field experiments and some of the new ones also were actually done in farms, in agricultural companies, even though it was more about economic questions or about incentives, but I'll point you to some of those. So what do they tell us? So let's start with a question. How do we design incentives for employees? I will be talking about consumers later, but first maybe I'll talk about firms and designing incentives for employees. So if I ask that question, an economic answer might look something like this, something pretty complicated, and obviously this is just a picture I got from the web, but depending on your situation, there might be a complicated answer, and that depends very much on a situation. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about those. Rather, I would talk about some more basic questions. How, given, say, a monetary incentives, how we can make some changes, some small changes, but some more basic changes that is more generalizable in some sense, that may make the workers work harder or better. So one first question is, so when economists talk about designing the same monetary payment structure for workers, we always talk about that we have to give them incentives, specifically monetary incentives. So if you produce more, you get paid more. But many of the salary structures are just fixed wages. Maybe in the long run, they get more bonuses or, raises and so on if they produce more. But many cases, it's fixed wages. So one even first question could be, do incentives even matter? Actually, if we pay people more when they produce more, do they actually produce more? So for that, and there are many studies, but the one I will talk about is what me and some co-authors did in Chinese factories. So short answer is yes, but let me elaborate. So what we did was we went to these Chinese factories, and some of the workers were getting fixed wage, some of them were getting a piece rate wage. So, and we gave them additional payments or changed their incentive structure that they received piece rate bonuses or piece rate wages. So if they produce more, they got paid more. What we find, as probably you won't be surprised, that if we pay them a piece rate, they actually work harder, produce more. But there was one interesting thing we noticed, was that as a control, some people, instead of giving them some monetary incentive, a piece rate incentive, we just gave them a nice letter encouraging them to keep on their hard work. And that actually increased productivity quite a bit. Mind you, not as much as a monetary incentives, but these monetary incentives cost money. And you have to actually figure out, yes, if I pay them more, they work harder, or pay them a piece rate, they work harder, but it also costs more. Does that make sense? But here, just giving them an encouraging letter nudge them, and something I will come back, a theme I will come back later, nudge them to work a bit harder. And then there is another question. Okay, giving them a piece rate makes them work harder, but when we think about people's work, so economists just look at, okay, you put in effort, you produce quantity, kind of one-dimensional. But in reality, when people work, there are multiple dimensions. So when you are at your work, you do, you perform multiple tasks. Even for a simple factory worker who is producing one single thing, there is two dimensions actually, quantity and also quality. So we give them more money, they produce more, but what happens to quality? So if you ask that question, one simple answer would be to just look at, once we paid them this piece rate, what happened to quality. There is a caveat though. The fact that the managers know, even if the managers are not paying the employees for quality, the fact that managers tell us the quality means that the managers know the quality. And that, the fact that it is observable, that may not necessarily tell us whether people want to shirk on quality because they're getting paid for quantity. So what we did was we looked at some tasks where there was regular quality inspection. We also looked at a little bit simpler tasks where there is no regular quality inspection. And without the workers knowing, we hired inspectors who secretly inspected the quality when we gave them monetary incentives. And we found that indeed, when we gave them monetary incentives, they increased quantity, but these people whose product was not inspected, the quality went down. So when you are thinking about designing incentive schemes, you have to also think about what you are doing, what kind of money you are giving, but you have to also think about the dimensions for which you are not paying, because sometimes there will be some aspects for which you cannot pay them, and people may then shirk on that. There may be adverse effect on that. So with this data, and we also did similar work for the work where there was, by the system of the factory, there was 100% inspection, and there are people who have worked in the medical sector where paying for performance and multitasking of doctors is very important. From there, what we learned is that this people not putting effort in dimensions where they're not paid actually is not a problem when it is, even though you are not paid for quality, the quality is observed. So one lesson is that if your work involves multiple dimensions, and you can pay for some, you cannot pay for the others. To make sure that people are not shirking on the unpaid dimensions, even observing them mitigates that concern quite a bit. Also, I talked about that giving encouraging letter increased productivity quite a bit. Not as much as giving them money, but still quite a bit for free. Also, interestingly, those people, the quality did not go down. So because they're not getting any monetary incentive to increase quantity and say reduce effort in quality, they were happier to get an encouraging letter, but that didn't affect their quality. Okay. Also, in incentive design, social networks and peer effects do matter. So this is work by Oriana Bandiera and her colleagues in UK, and they ran some experiments with fruit pickers in United Kingdom. And what they looked at was managers. So these fruit pickers they pick fruits, and they're paid for how much fruits they pick, and the managers are in charge of logistics. So what they found is when the managers are paid a fixed wage, they actually favor in terms of designing the logistics and so on to their friends. So they favored their friends or people they're socially connected to. But once the managers are paid for the average performance of workers under them, this effect goes away. Managers actually focus their efforts, the logistic efforts, towards the most productive workers. Also, there is an interesting study by Mass and Moretti in the US using grocery store cash clerks. So incentives matter, but sometimes peer effects is quite important. So what they found is that if they put in and inject a highly productive worker in the shift, the productivity of other workers, cash clerks, went up, but it went up only for the cash clerks who could observe the highly productive workers. And workers who were in the same shift as the highly productive worker but could not observe the highly productive worker, their productivity was not affected. So these small changes actually make a large difference in how productive your workers are. So workers care about how productive other workers are, and managers care about social network. How do workers care about what their peers know about how much do I care about how much my peers know about how good I am? So this is actually very important for sectors where sales force is very important. So for medical representative, sales force is their bread and butter, and they have a lot of contests to motivate salespeople. If you sell more, you get a reward. And again, you can design those incentive structures, those contests optimally, the monetary part. What we are interested in that, how should the company recognize their sales force, recognize the outcome of the contests. So the motivation for this work came from, say, Olympics. When you look at Olympics, most of the time, the person that looks the saddest is the person who won the silver medal. So we were thinking that if you have a sales force contest, how should you announce the outcome of the contest? Should you tell people anything about it? Maybe you shouldn't even tell people, we'll announce what the sales contest is, but and you will get your reward. So from your reward, you may know you came first, or you came second, or you didn't win anything, but maybe we shouldn't announce. Or we can do something like President's Club. We announce a bunch of people, like say top 5 or top 5%, but we don't tell among top 5% who is first, who is second, and so on. Or we can just do Employee of the Month, just the top 1%. But the thing is, the people we announce, we don't really tell people what the ranking is. Or we can announce the entire rank. So what is called Wall of Fame and Shame. We say that Maurice came first, JP came second, and Tanjim Hossain came dead last. So how should we do that? What we found is that president, in general, recognizing workers or salespeople is better. They actually produce more. However, they produce more when it is announced as a president's club. So we announce that these are high performers, but we don't say this guy came first, this guy came second, and so on. And it works much better than both not announcing and also Wall of Fame and Shame, where we fame some people and shame others. Also, so in this case, we looked at how much I care about other people knowing how well I'm doing. Do I care about knowing how well I'm doing when it's not a contest? Suppose I get a commission, sales commission, but there is no contest, so I get commission based on my absolute performance. Do I care about my ranking? So Ivan Baranke, working with salespeople in furniture industry, found that in that case, actually it's better not to people their rank. So if you're paying your sales force as just a commission, there is no contest, ranking is not important, then don't tell them what their rank is. That actually demotivates people. Okay? All right, so let me change gear a little and ask you guys a question. I'll give you 2 lotteries. The first one, you will win $1,000 with 90% probability, 90% chance, and with nothing with 10%. The other one, you'll win $900 for sure. How many of you, and please show hands, don't be like my students, how many of you will choose a lottery A? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I say 10. How many B? Okay, so a lot. I won't count. Okay, let me ask you another question. So now, suppose I give you $1,000. I don't have $1,000 on me, but suppose I do, and I give you all $1,000. Now, I have an offer. Offer A is, I will take away $1,000, and with probably 90%, and with 10% chance, you will keep the $1,000. Offer C is, I take away $900 out of the $1,000 I gave you for sure. How many will take C, where there is a chance of 10% that you'll keep $1,000? Okay, around 30 or 40 people. How about D? 900 is gone for sure, around 10. Okay, so these 2 cases are basically the same thing. But the thing is, the first one, you are gaining $1,000 versus with 90% chance versus gaining 900 for sure, and you preferred the sure thing. In the second case, you are losing $1,000 with 90% chance or losing $900 for sure, and people preferred the chance. So this is called loss aversion. So in some sense, the main idea is that a $1,000 gain or a $1,000 loss hurts a lot more than the happiness you get from a $1,000 gain. And this is actually Maurice, I think, or JP mentioned loss aversion or prospect theory. It is part of prospect theory, suggested by Kahneman and Tversky. And this works quite generally. For example, and so formally what it means, the picture-wise, you can see that, as I said, a $1,000 gain makes you much less happy than the $1,000 loss hurts. Also, in some sense, when you are thinking about gains, people are risk averse. They would rather go for sure thing than getting sure thing, the expected value, than taking a lottery. On the other hand, when people are thinking about loss, they would rather take a lottery than losing the money for sure. This also means, and this is something that is quite common, and people have worked on it with data from professional golfers. Professional golfers actually putt much better when they are trying to save a bogey, rather than when if they succeed, when they're trying to make a birdie. So when they're going to gain a point by making the putt, they do much worse than when they're going to lose a point if they don't make a putt. So we tried to use this principle with real workers. So providing carrots or sticks, actually sticks, that is actually a carrot dressed as a stick. So what we did is, again, we went to these factories in China, and these are electronics, pretty high-tech electronics factories that manufacture for China and also for the West, like they work for Sharp, Panasonic, and so on. So these are pretty high-tech and high-quality factories. And we offered the workers, as a part of the administration, a bonus for reaching a target. It was a 4-week program, and one group or some groups, we told them that it's a 4-week program for in every week. So this target, it is fixed for each group. Every week your productivity reaches the target, you will receive 80 renminbi, which was like more than 20% of their weekly income. The other group, we said that we have a 4-week program after which you're going to get 320 renminbi. However, in every week where your productivity does not reach this target, and they had the same target, we will take away 80 renminbi from this 320 renminbi. So these are two exactly same incentive structure. From an economics point of view, there shouldn't be any difference. But you can probably guess what we found. We found that we are giving them bonus to produce more, so both groups produce more. However, the groups that were under the loss frame or got the carrot dressed as a stick, these guys, their productivity actually went up more. So loss aversion actually works. You can even go to your factory and you motivate workers to produce more using loss aversion. There are some caveats, and maybe I'll get to them if there are questions. But still, even in a factory with regular workers, loss aversion works. One interesting thing was we found it to be stronger among groups of workers instead of individual workers. Then we thought, okay, here we gave them a target. What if we make them compete against each other? So there were many groups producing the same thing. We said that, okay, again, for these people, we gave similar kind of bonuses, either 80 renminbi per week, or you get 320, but 80 renminbi gets taken away if you don't produce enough. But now the produce enough part was different. Instead of a target, what we told them is that we gave them a group. So I told JP that if you produce more than Maurice, you'll get the 80 renminbi, and if you produce less, then you won't get it. So basically, instead of a fixed target, an absolute target, it was relative production and the competition. So what happened there? So we find that loss aversion is still there, but it works in a different way. So what happened was, if we looked at absolute productivity, there seemed to be that loss guys produced more, but there was a lot of variance in the production, in the productivity. So the effect statistically was not significant. But the effect was really statistically significant and very large when we looked at which group won the competition. The loss group won the competition like almost 40% more times. So what happens is that people now focus on producing more. And if you are producing, somehow you, at the beginning of the week, you produce a lot, then you slow down a little because you know you will still win. Or somehow you had a negative shock and you didn't produce too much at the beginning, then you produce a lot, like you slow down because you're going to lose anyway. But since it is much more salient, the salience is in terms of winning or losing, there we see loss aversion has a very strong effect. What does that mean? That means that if you're in a factory or you have workers where, like salespeople, where you care about absolute productivity, you probably shouldn't, even if you use loss aversion, you shouldn't use it as a competition. You care about absolute productivity, then you should give the target in terms of absolute productivity, a fixed target. On the other hand, if you are a manager of a basketball team or the Ottawa Senators, then you care about winning. In that case, if you want to use loss aversion, you should provide the framing in terms of winning or losing. So when you think about incentives, you also have to figure out what your objective is, whether you care about absolute productivity or relative productivity. And how you design your incentives or even these manipulations will depend on that. Okay. So another example from agricultural field experiment. So incentive contracts can be quite complicated. And incentive, the monetary content matters, but we show, like my previous example was that the language matters. Also, even workers care about a lot of things. What is made salient, what is more clearer also matters. So in an experiment with European lettuce pickers, what the researchers found, Florian Engelmeyer and his co-authors, found that the part of the contract that is more salient matters. Specifically, these workers were always paid piece rate for picking lettuce. But what they did was they just went in and made the piece rate more salient. They announced every day, reminded people every day what the piece rate was, and that actually increased productivity. And salience is something pretty important, and now I'll move on to consumers. So a lot of times, prices you pay has many different components, and some of the components are more salient than others. For example, for this hotel, when they advertise the price, they tell you the price. They don't exactly tell you the tax. And the tax rate actually sometimes varies between, like in the US, between states or even between hotels sometimes. Or they don't tell you how much it costs for internet or for, say, telephone bills and things like that, which was important before people had, like everybody had cell phone, because you would go to a hotel and make a phone call home and you wouldn't even know how much it costs. Or for banks, there are many hidden fees. So prices are quite frequently shrouded or obfuscated. Or for e-commerce, there are shipping and handling fee. A lot of times, you don't really know what it is until you are almost ready to press the button and order it. But you have already made your purchasing decision based on the price without shipping and handling. So as a consumer, you care about the total price, but what is clearer to you is maybe just some part of the price. And how does that affect consumer behavior? So in a relatively old study, we ran field experiments on eBay. And so this was back when I was in grad school. eBay was relatively new, and there were a lot more auctions there. So what we found that charging a $4 shipping fee we were selling CDs and video games, actually instead of free shipping, but kind of raising the starting price of the auction, raised revenue. So the real starting price were the same, but in one case, starting price came from just the opening price on eBay. Another case, the opening price on eBay was small, but shipping and handling fee was large. We found that revenue went up by 40% over charging $4 shipping fee, increased revenue by almost $3.5, which was like 40%. But does it work? How much does it work? Can I just charge $100 shipping fee for a CD and charge a low price? No, that doesn't work. So as long as the people did not look at shipping fee as much, but they did look at it, or maybe some people didn't, but some other people did. So when the shipping fee was really high, this trick didn't work. But still, at a more reasonable level, it actually made sense to charge a relatively high but reasonable shipping fee than not charging any shipping fee or a small shipping fee. And salience matters even in terms of taxes. So Raj Chetty and his co-authors, what they did was went to grocery stores in California and put in, so usually when you see the prices, it's pre-tax price. But the tax rate everybody knows in your province or in your state. But the thing is, people don't really take that into consideration when they make decisions. So what they did was, in some cases, in some stores, or some weeks, they actually put in an additional tag that told people what the post-tax price was. So, for example, it would say pre-tax price, the price is $5, post-tax price is $5.65. And what they found is that just putting in an additional label reduced demand by 8%. And this they found even with observational data from alcohol sales. What they found, when the excise tax, which is directly then goes into price, is increased, the alcohol demand reduces a lot more than an increase in or a change in sales tax, which people pay when they actually go to the counter. Also, with looking at sales of hybrid car sales, Gallagher and Mueliger found that sales tax waivers led to a more than 10 times increase in hybrid sales than relative to a cut in earned income tax credits, so EITC. So in that case, basically you get an income tax credit 1 year down the road when you file taxes, and in sales tax waiver, you actually see the benefit directly. It's much more salient. Then the demand for hybrid cars increased a lot more, in fact, 10 times more. So salience matters, and let me go back to my previous study of shrouding the shipping fee. So there, remember that shipping fee is not so obvious, and if we charge a reasonable but higher shipping fee, we got higher revenue. Then we asked, can we turn it off and on? So that is pretty important in terms of policy. So specifically, can we put in the shipping fee in the title? And this is in Chinese. We ran our experiment in Yahoo Taiwan and eBay Ireland. So this is in Chinese, and you cannot really read it, but in here we are actually putting in, so we ran the same kind of experiment, but in some case the shipping fee was buried inside the item description. In some case it was actually at the title. And we found that this effect of increasing shipping fee increases revenue quite a bit, or more than, like, increasing shipping fee by $1 increases revenue by $13. That effect goes away if we put the shipping fee on the title. So make things clearer. So then you might say that, okay, then probably one shouldn't do that, because I have a way of kind of using the bias of consumers to generate or increase revenue, and if I make things clearer, the effect goes away. But that's actually not true. What we found, although then there was no shipping fee effect, but overall revenue was higher when we actually announced shipping fee in the title. So overall, people were seeing that these stores are announcing shipping fee upfront, and probably they trusted us more. Or maybe some of them, like when they didn't see the shipping fee, thought that it would be the worst, like very high or so on. So overall, but still, it seems that consumer trust went up in some sense, and that was beneficial because our overall revenue went up. And that seems to be true in general because in eBay US, and that's why in eBay US, they actually, around the same time or slightly before we ran our study, but after we ran our first study, they actually started putting shipping and handling fee in the search page. So now if you go to eBay and search for something, you'll see the price, and you will also see the shipping fee in your search page. And we had data from both before and after, and we find that even like in our small data set, and we find that eBay revenue from observational data, but we luckily had some data from before and after the change. After the change, the revenues went up. We have told eBay this story, and they didn't tell us if that's true or not, but it sounds like they know that that actually works. So consumer trust matters. And making these small changes, you can actually make consumers be more profitable towards you or make better decisions. So rest of the talk, I'm going to talk about nudging and making better choices, sometimes from a policy point of view, sometimes from a business point of view. And what is nudging? I once mentioned already that we gave the workers in basically my first slide, we gave the workers an encouraging letter without any monetary benefits. They worked harder. So that's a nudge. In general, a behavioral nudge gets people to do something without that you desire, without forcing their option sets or choice sets, like reducing what they can do, or providing any financial motivation. So many of the nudges are from government's perspective, and one of the studies found that students ate healthy or chose fruits and vegetables over chips and other unhealthy snacks when the fruits and vegetables were closer to their eyes and were easier to reach, and or the chips was like higher in the shelf and so on. So this is called kind of manipulating your choice architecture. The idea is that choice architecture basically means how your brain processes the choices. And this is something from, somebody created with the Simpsons characters, But the idea is that putting the fruits closer and the donut way high up makes even Homer Simpson buy healthier food, and the police officer. That probably is a good thing. And this is not something totally new, in the sense that grocery stores actually have been doing it for a while. Supermarkets put like higher profitable products, profits with higher margin at eye level, and or restaurants put higher, more profitable items, food items, at places where consumers are more likely to see them. Also, sometimes you want to make better choices easier. So this is a study from a study, or a number of studies by my colleague Phil Oriopoulos, who works in education, and his co-authors. What they found was they went, in the US, H&R Block, people use them to file their taxes. What they did was they contracted with H&R Blocks, and for relatively poorer families, what H&R Block offered was that when they're doing taxes, they would also help them write up FAFSA, or Federal Application for Free Student Aid, fill out for that for free. And what happened was students from these poorer families, kids applied to college and enrolled in college a lot more. Even the rate of graduating from two-year colleges went up by 8%. So sometimes you need to hold the hands of the people or your consumers to make them better so that they make better choices. And better choices might be more profitable choices, or could be something that's better from the society's point of view. Also, sometimes you need to lead people to better choices. In Copenhagen, they found that putting these green footprints on the street leading to garbage cans increase or reduce littering by 46%. Also, you will sometimes see that in hallways of, say, commercial buildings, there are lines to lead people to lead people to staircases instead of elevators or escalators. So you need to lead people to better choices and nudge them for better choices. And also, you need to avoid bad design. For example, this is an example of a fitness center, but they have the really 7-8 stairs, but the escalator next to it, and you can see for yourself what it does. So you need to avoid bad design. Or sometimes you would see doors, like these double doors, there are knobs. So when there are knobs, people's intuition is that you pull it. So a bad design would be, and there are doors like that, there is a knob, but you actually have to push it. So in general, you have making designs more intuitive and choices more intuitive helps. So, but nudge doesn't always work. When nudges don't work, what do? You give it a push. So an example, in general, make the undesirable decisions a bit more difficult. So this is an example of those clocks, which after the alarm starts, it's kind of rolls over and runs away from you. So hitting the snooze button is more difficult. And sometimes you need to design things like that. So for example, suppose you want people to save more. One thing that has worked, and this work is in Philippines by Dean Carlin and a couple of his colleagues, what they did was provided people access or a new bank account, which was actually worse in the sense that it didn't provide any higher interest rate than existing bank account, but you had to commit. If you start putting in money, you couldn't take take money out of the account for 1 year or something like that. And this actually was very successful in making people save more. In fact, people who were offered this special commitment account, which was in some economic sense a worse account because it's less flexible, people actually saved 81% more. So tying their hands, if you need to, if people are making bad decisions, you may have to. Or this is not exactly tying their hand, but sometimes making things easier, saving easier helps. So in the US, Shlomo Banerjee and his colleagues, he's an academician, but they have started these Save More Tomorrow campaigns where what they did convince some companies to, so for 401k savings, set up a target rate. So some companies set a very high target rate, 15%. That doesn't work. What they did was setting low target rate, but the workers commit that every time they get a raise, the target rate goes up by, say, 0.25%. So you start at 3%, but when you get a raise, the automatic deduction rate goes up by 25%. And that improved savings rate quite a bit. And as government, we care about savings rate, but even as businesses, for consumers, the savings rate in US and even Canada is pretty low. So if they save more, ultimately they'll spend more. Sometimes even a small default helps a lot. Bridget Medrian and Shea, they found that enrollment in 401k went up by almost 50% when they made enrollment instead of opt-in an opt-out option. So by default, you are enrolled in the 401k plan, but so you have to actually make some effort to get out, and that increased participation rate by 50%. This even works for many other things. People sometimes just simply don't check boxes, even though these are important decisions. For example, only 12% of the eligible population in Germany are registered as organ donor. How long do we have? Okay. Are registered as organ donors. On the other hand, in Austria, neighboring Austria, it's close to 100%. And there is a very small difference. In Germany, you have to opt in. In Austria, you have to opt out. And this is not just Austria and Germany. In Europe, you would see that all these blue countries, Austria, Belgium, France, Poland, and so on, the donor enrollment rate is extremely high. The other countries like Germany, UK, Netherlands, it's relatively low. And the difference is opt-in. The blue ones are opt-out, and the yellow ones are opt-in. So finally, I will talk about giving consumers options. So I already showed that in terms of savings, flexible savings may not be as good. How about options, choices? Should we give consumers a lot of choices? Maybe not that always. Like, if there are many different choices, they can choose for themselves what is the best, but that doesn't always work too well. So this work by Sheena Iyengar and her co-authors. So what they did, they went to a fancy supermarket and set up stalls with very high-end jams. In one case, the stalls had 6 jams, 6 different flavors. Other case, the stalls had 24 different flavors. And buyers were offered to sample, and they were even given a coupon to buy those jams. So they could track how many people came and sampled, how many people actually bought the product. And what they found, when they were offering 6 jams in a stall, 40% of the people who were around actually came in and tasted the jams. and 30% of them bought a jam. So overall, 12% of the consumers bought jam. When there were 24 flavors, 60% of the people actually came in and tasted, but then only 3% of them bought something. So overall, 1.8% as opposed to 12% of the people bought a jam from these stalls. So here, you are giving them too many choices. So in some sense, it becomes more difficult cognitively to make decisions when you have too many options. And you may want to make life easier by giving them fewer options, and probably options that are more profitable. And this is true not only for buying jams, it's also important, like this pattern shows, in savings rate. So here on the y-axis, we have the 401k plan participation rate and savings rate, and on x-axis, number of funds offered. You see that offering more funds reduces actually savings by a lot. So sometimes you may want to restrict choices, make life simpler, easier. But is simple always better? Maybe not. People like variety. People like to feel that things are more interesting. So in a study in a cafeteria, Brian Wansing found that nice descriptive labels, which for the same food product was make people order that food product more and rate them, evaluate them much better. So basically, they called the same fish fillet, in some cases succulent Italian fish fillet, and some cases they just called it fish fillet. And when they were called succulent fish fillet, the evaluations by these students in cafeteria was much more positive. And they found similar, then working with industry, with the restaurants, they found similar effects in restaurants too. So they actually use this succulent Italian fish fillet versus fish fillet, also Cajun red bean rice instead of just red bean rice. And they found that diners were on average willing to spend 12% more for a menu item that sounded fancier, that sounded attractive. Or they found that calling something restaurant favorite actually increased the how much they were ordered by a significant amount. So to finish, the main lesson is that you have to make consumer decision simple but interesting. So it needs to be interesting but easy. And that's where I would like to end my talk. Thank you very much.
Well,